Friends, it is time to address one of the biggest thefts in all of U.S. history. And we're talking about 6 congressional seats and 6 electoral college votes that were literally stolen from one side and given to the other. This happened all under the guise of COVID restrictions and, oh, we can't actually count properly. We're just going to have to estimate. They violated the Constitution, and there needs to be a reckoning. There needs to be an account held. There needs to be people thrown in jail, and this wrong needs to be fixed because it is causing major problems in the United States, and it is causing people like me to seriously question whether this is a democracy even in the end. Now, I know it's a constitutional republic, but constitutional republic is a form of democracy. Anyway, a representative democracy. All right, friends, we're going to talk about what happened in 2020. If you're not familiar with what happened in 2020, it's awful, okay? And then on top of that, we're also going to be talking about the fixes that are being discussed right now. The Trump administration, as well as Republicans in Congress, are moving forward with potentially a solution. This is a big deal. Let's get into it. Welcome to the Poplar Report. I'm Steve Poplar. I'm an accountant by trade, and these are things you just will not hear on the mainstream media. Now, I've said some pretty crazy things just now. I said that the census miscounted to the tune of 6 congressional seats. And that's a pretty bold claim. How do I know that the numbers that I'm using against the numbers of the census are that far off? How do I know my numbers are valid? Well, for the first thing is that those numbers actually come from the same census department that the census came from. This is how much they say they were off. Now, we're not even going to go into how much further off they are probably than what they should be, but listen to these statistics by their own admission, and you tell me if they did a good job. Just for reference, once again, we have about 370 million people in the United States, but we really don't know because why? We don't have a census that actually counted everybody. All right. They say that 18.8 million people were not counted in the census. That's not a small number. That's not a small number. 18.8 million people not counted. But they say, don't worry about it. It's fine because that was counteracted by the 10.8 million who didn't file a response or a complete response. Wait a minute, that doesn't make things better. That you didn't count people because they didn't file a form? How does that? And 7.2 million people who are counted twice. You counted over 7 million people twice? And you put that into the actual results because you're telling yourself that it offsets the people that you didn't count? Like, this is what a 3-year-old does when they're like counting M&Ms, okay? I didn't count those, but I counted these double twice, so it's okay. It's all fine. No, that's not how you count, right? That's how lazy people count. That's how people who aren't really trying to count. For all this monstrosity, $13.7 billion were spent, or approximately $40 a person. Our government spent $40 a person to count every person and missed almost 10% of them. When I say missed, I mean either missed or they double counted them. That's not a good percentage. In statistics and in accounting and such, we have this term, statistically significant, right? If you're doing an audit of a company or whatever, there's a formula that actually calculates, is this statistically significant? if you have a $10,000 budget and you lose $1,000 and you can't account for it, that's statistically significant. If you have an $80 million business and you don't know how this $10,000 over here was spent, it's not statistically significant. We just assume it was spent on something proper because it's not big in the sense of the $80 million business, right? So statistically significant, but when you start approaching 10% of your count is off, that is definitely statistically significant. That means you suck at your job. You absolutely are horrible at your job. And the fact that it cost us $13.7 billion to get to the point where it was completely off to the tune of 6 House of Representatives being apportioned to the wrong states, 6 electoral college votes being apportioned to the wrong states, and they all seem to go one way. If those 6 congressional seats were in the states they should be, they would all, by projections, be Republican. And right now, they're all Democrat. So, we've just swung the House of Representatives by 12 votes. If we remove 6 Democrats and replace them with 6 Republicans, that's not a swing of 6, that's a swing of 12. And since right now we're talking about a swing of 3 votes in the House of Representatives to switch the party, that's kind of significant. That's kind of important. We won't even, now, President Trump didn't need those electoral votes, of course, because, he blew them out by so bad, blew her out by so bad, that it wasn't significant in this last election. But you go back a previous election and, was that significant? Yeah, it was. We're not talking about a small number. So, the Commerce Department itself, back in 2022, when they did their review of the census, where they were supposed to count, let me just read it from the actual Constitution for you. Actual enumeration of whole, free individuals. Actual enumeration. That doesn't mean guesstimates. That doesn't mean you use statistical probabilities or other gamification of the system. No, that means you go around, you count noses. The Constitution explicitly says you need to count everybody. You can't guess, you have to count. Well, that's a problem, because back when COVID was happening, they decided that, one, that they could steal an office, okay? They thought, that's fine, we can have boxes and we can not have security cameras, we can play all sorts of shenanigans and we can take control. They did that, indeed, and you're well aware of that. I don't need to preach to the choir about that. But most folks on our side don't realize that they also rigged the census at the same time. They not only stole one, they went and they made sure that that they had a home field advantage over the next 10 years to the tune of 6 House of Representatives apportioned incorrectly. How do you get that bad of numbers? You would actually have better numbers if you just didn't do the census at all and you just went with the previous census. Let that sink in. You would have been closer to the accurate count if you just used the previous census. That's crazy. Now, we have a whole other issue that President Trump is talking about, which is, one, that the census shouldn't be counting people, it should be counting citizens. That's a pretty big shift, because not only would we be correcting the 6 imbalance, but then we would also be moving up to 9 more seats. Are you seeing how fraudulent and how rigged the system is? This is what the House of Representatives are doing. They are moving legislation forward to demand a census, a early census, to move it up, not waiting till 2030, but to move it up now. Now, that's a major undertaking. I'm not sure exactly how they plan to count noses, but using the you gotta, the Constitution says actual enumeration, but they came up with some different strategies on counting when the COVID was happening. Group quarters imputation. And if you're like, that sounds like mumbo jumbo. Well, it is, except it's a mathematical model that the Census Department, Census Bureau decided to use instead of actually counting people. So if you wondered, how do you miss 18.8 million people? Well, there's your name for it. Group quarters imputation. Using that instead of counting. Now, if you were just to have a bunch of pencil pushers sitting in a room with computers, because you got to have computers to make it look legitimate, right? And they're just guessing. Should that have cost $13.7 billion? That's basically the cost of a brand new nuclear-powered aircraft carrier. We could have had another nuclear-powered aircraft carrier or several nuclear attack submarines instead of a counting that didn't actually count people. They're supposed to go up, knock on doors, supposed to go into nursing homes, count noses, actually see the people, not just go with, you're not supposed to just go with the records that the nursing homes have, though that would have been significantly more accurate than what they even did. They didn't use that. They used, where's the term for it? So they basically, group quarter imputation, okay, that's nursing homes and then also other structures like apartment buildings. They didn't want to go in because of COVID. So if you have an apartment structure here, it's just like, let's just guess. I mean, they put a fancy name on it, but they guessed. And that's how they missed 18.8 million people. You're really bad at guessing if you miss that many people, or overcounted 7.1 million people. But not only that, they also had some other things in there where they decided to falsify information and then call it a policy. Wait, they falsified information? Yes. They said that they were doing a differential privacy to hide people's identity within the data sets. So they took demographic information of individuals and then they intentionally falsified it in order to make all of the data to be questionable, right? So it's like you can't look at this data point and go, oh, this is this person, because you know that in the data set are falsified individuals. But that brings us back to the point of falsified individuals in the census. Actual enumeration, actual counting, doesn't mean you actually count and then you lie about what you counted. Like, you just go down the list of how many different ways that the census messed up on record levels. We're talking about Senator Jim Banks. Just last week, had the Commerce Secretary, Howard Lutnick, in a hearing and asked him to investigate the fraud of the 2020 census. That's where this is coming from, okay? The Commerce Secretary said, okay, we'll look into it. The Trump administration right now is investigating the fraud of the 2020 census. Senator Jim Banks basically laid out some of the facts to them. Like, you guys didn't count. The Constitution says you have to count. Can you imagine if we did that with any other part of the, Constitution? President Trump's like, it says that we should have an election, but how about if we just don't have an election? I know we're supposed to count the votes, but what if we just estimated the votes? You see a problem with that? Would you, at that point, be out there with the No Kings protests if someone did suggest that they just estimate the votes? I think that we would all have serious concerns about that, right? I think we'd all be like, no, that's not what the Constitution says. And yet, that's exactly what they did with the census. And the census apportions how the votes are counted. Should you be outraged over this? You absolutely should be. The Constitution was flagrantly violated. According to the Constitution, every 10 years, everyone, all the people, need to be actual enumeration of each person. So, one could look at the census in 2020 and say that did not occur. So, we're behind. We're 5 years behind. We need to do it right now. We need to do the 2020 census. That would be something that, if Congress were to pass the bills, could be considered. We might have a 2026 census to correct the 2020 census. And that could mean that the congressional seats could be reapportioned and the the electoral college could be reapportioned before the next presidential election. Now, I don't know that they could actually get a reapportionment of the congressional seats for the midterms, but this is one of those things that needs to be corrected, and it needs to be made sure, at the very least, that this never ever happens again. But I think we're all kind of tired of this will never happen again. We'll make sure it never happens again. It happened, and nobody's in jail for it. And you can't tell me that this isn't some grand conspiracy, because it absolutely is. You cannot look at the mass non-counting and overcounting, statistically massively representing people in the rural areas because they didn't go out there and count. They just estimated that those rural areas didn't have as many people as before. And then when they actually go out and do more statistical analysis after the census, they find that they were completely off. There's consumer information. The government is literally tracking everybody's cell phone, and yet somehow, with $13 billion, we can't seem to count people. Friends, that's a little too hard to believe. That's a pill a little too hard to swallow, if you know what I mean. And friends, we shouldn't. This needs to be corrected. There needs to be consequences, and it needs to be corrected as quickly as possible. All right, friends, let me know what you guys think down in the comments down below. And that is the biggest theft ever in U.S. history. I'll see you guys next time. If you want to check out another video from this channel, there's one right up here. I'll see you over there, or I'll see you guys later. Steve Poplar of the Poplar Report, out.